In the early 1930s, aviation was still the frontier of adventure. Air travel promised speed, efficiency, and the thrill of touching the clouds, but it was not without danger. Navigation was primitive, weather forecasting unreliable, and every flight carried risks that modern travelers can scarcely imagine. This is the story of the Trans-Continental Airliner Pioneer, a plane that vanished into the Rocky Mountains in October 1932, only to reappear against all odds. A tale of courage, survival, and the unforgiving power of nature.
It was October 14th, 1932, a crisp morning in Denver, Colorado. The sun barely pierced the clouds, painting the airfield in muted shades of orange and gray. The Trans-Continental Airliner Pioneer stood ready for departure, a sleek silver monoplane with room for 8 passengers and a crew of 2. Among the passengers was Charles Whitman, a young journalist with an insatiable curiosity. He had covered aviation for local newspapers and had grown fascinated by the promise and peril of air travel. Charles to himself, "This is history in motion, flying across the Rockies in a machine of metal and dreams. Let's hope it holds together." Captain Edward Hawkins, a veteran pilot with over a decade of experience, inspected the plane. His co-pilot, Samuel O'Reilly, checked instruments with meticulous care. Hawkins, "Passengers aboard. Weather looks patchy over the mountains. Turbulence expected. Fasten your seatbelts and keep calm." The plane roared to life, its radial engine vibrating beneath the cabin floor. The passengers waved to the ground crew as the aircraft taxied down the runway, lifted, and soared toward the jagged peaks of the Rockies.
At first, the flight was serene. The landscape below unfolded like a tapestry, amber valleys, winding rivers, and snow-dusted peaks. Passengers whispered in awe, taking in the view. Charles scribbled notes in his leather-bound journal, recording the subtle beauty of this dangerous frontier. But by mid-morning, clouds thickened, visibility dropped. The plane entered a layer of heavy turbulence. The cabin shook violently. Plates rattled and passengers gripped their seats. Passenger, whispering, "Is this normal?" Hawkins, calmly, "Mountain air can be unpredictable. We'll get through." But the mountains had other plans. A sudden downdraft, invisible yet powerful, struck the Pioneer. The plane pitched sharply. Instruments wobbled. Charles's heart raced as he clutched his notebook, peering at the jagged peaks that now loomed just beyond the clouds. Sharp crack echoed through the fuselage. The wing trembled. Passengers screamed. Hawkins fought the yoke with all his strength, sweat beading on his forehead. Hawkins, "Stay calm. Brace for turbulence." The plane was caught in a mountain microburst, a violent column of descending air that could tear a plane from the sky. The radio failed, leaving them completely isolated. The mountainous terrain below was covered in snow, jagged rocks, and frozen rivers. No safe landing in sight. Charles gripped the armrest, eyes wide. The metal groaned as the wind battered the fuselage. Sparks flew from the landing gear as it scraped rocky outcrops. For a moment, it seemed certain they would crash into the valley below. But Captain Hawkins, relying on instinct honed from years of flying, maneuvered the plane into a narrow frozen plateau, landing hard but survivably. Snow exploded around the plane as it skidded to a stop. Silence fell over the passengers, broken only by labored breathing and the wind howling through the mountains. They were stranded. The plane was damaged, the engine fractured, the radio useless. Around them stretched an endless expanse of mountains, devoid of civilization. O'Reilly, "We'll have to survive until help arrives. Stay together." The passengers scavenged supplies from the wreckage. Blankets, food rations, and emergency kits were limited. They built a makeshift shelter from wing panels and luggage, huddling together for warmth. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes within hours. Charles recorded everything, documenting the storm, the landing, and the survival efforts. His journalist's instincts merged with the human desire to endure. Charles narrating later, "We realized quickly that nature had no mercy. Every gust of wind, every shifting cloud was a reminder that we were at her mercy." Days passed slowly. The group faced bitter cold, hunger, and fatigue. But Captain Hawkins's leadership kept morale alive. They rationed food, melted snow for water, and huddled to preserve heat.
Charles wrote detailed sketches of the plateau and surrounding peaks, noting landmarks for rescuers. Small acts, sharing blankets, comforting the frightened, became lifelines in themselves. On the second night, a sudden blizzard tested their resolve. Snow drifted against the makeshift shelter, and the wind howled like a predator. Yet, by morning, they survived, though exhausted and frostbitten. On the third day, a search party, alerted by the plane's delayed arrival, combed the Rockies. Spotting the silver fuselage from a ridge, they called out in triumph. The stranded passengers waved frantically. Rescue teams navigated treacherous terrain to reach them. The passengers were weak but alive, their ordeal making headlines nationwide. Airliner survives mountain microburst. Passengers rescued. Charles later recounted, "The mountains took everything from us but our lives, and in return they taught us the fragile beauty of the sky."
The incident prompted aviation authorities to reconsider flight safety in mountainous regions. Improved weather forecasting, better instrumentation, and pilot training became priorities. Captain Hawkins was hailed as a hero, praised for skill and courage. The passengers returned home, forever bonded by the experience. Charles's articles brought attention to the human stories behind aviation accidents, highlighting resilience and bravery. The Pioneer incident of 1932 became more than just a survival tale. It became a story of human endurance, courage, and the relentless quest to conquer the skies, despite the unpredictable power of nature. Today, air travel is routine, efficient, and safe, but it is worth remembering the pioneers of the early skies. In 1932, the passengers of the Pioneer faced the ultimate test of survival, proving that courage, leadership, and human ingenuity can triumph against nature's fury. The mountains claimed nothing but left a story to inspire generations, a story of adventure, peril, and the indomitable human spirit.